I've been there. I've been through a divorce. I know the painful conflict and the separation and breakups can have on people. And we are just as much therapists as we are lawyers. And what we try to do in our office is provide a really a home-like environment where it's not quite so cold and indifferent. My staff will meet with the potential client in advance, so I'll have a lot of the information before the client ever even comes in to meet with me. We then will want to find out everything we can about the relationship and about the other party and about your children and about who you are personally. That's really important for me because if I'm going to go into court and I'm going to fight for somebody, I have to know who they are and I have to believe in what they have to tell me.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All righty. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of legal fields and jurisdictions because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by attorney Kelley Joseph, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears her name down in Broward County, Florida. Kelley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing, Justin?
I am doing good. Now, Kelley is a weird one on this channel because I reached out to her for a marketing something or other almost a decade ago. And somehow I've stayed in the Rolodex and everything kind of lined up well. And here we are having her on the podcast. So it's kind of a fun thing. But before we get started, as always, we are going to jump over and take a look at her website. So this is her website. It is kjosephlaw.com. That's kjosephlaw.com. You can also call her at 954 280-6411. As always, we will have all of her information down below in the About section of the description of this podcast. The law office of Kelley A. Joseph is a boutique family law firm based in Plantation, Florida, serving clients throughout Broward County and South Florida. The firm focuses on high conflict family law matters, including complex divorces, high net worth asset divisions, custody disputes, paternity, domestic violence, injunctions, alimony, child support, and parenting plans. A particular niche represented with families that she represents, rather, is families with special needs children, where Kelley combines decades of legal experience with personal insights. And so we'll be talking about that today as we are talking with Kelley. Before we do that, though, we are going to jump over and take a read from our sponsors. And our first sponsor today is Rank with News. Is not being in the news regularly costing your firm or your business credibility and visibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about, I just realized I didn't ever reset the page. We were talking about this before in the pre-roll. Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about dumb luck than science? If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Bloomberg, Forbes, Reuters, AP News, etc., and seeing those articles ranking locally, even nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people are actually searching for, well, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and oftentimes permanently. This is guaranteed SEO, or search engine optimization, on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business, please visit rankwithnews.com or rankwith.news to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one of Google in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with Rank with News. Our second sponsor for today is Groove Funnels, and I have that sponsor over here as well. If you're running an online business, that doesn't mean you should be paying for 12 different tools before you've ever even made a sale, and that's why Groove is a thing. Groove gives entrepreneurs, creators, marketers one platform for funnels, checkouts, emails, memberships, e-commerce, webinars, blogs, affiliates, automations, and more. There's no credit card needed. There's no trial that flips. There's no monthly software bill. Just to get started, Groove is legitimately free to use. They only earn a small platform fee whenever you actually sell something on their site, but otherwise there's nothing to pay ever, no monthly software bill just to get started, no trial that flips. So stop duct taping your business together with expensive subscriptions. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove today to start for free and never pay anything. That's theattorneypost.com/groove to get started today. And as always, thank you to our sponsors, and we will have links to them down below in the description section, as I said. Move the Zoom window over here, and there we go. All right. So again, today's guest is Kelley Joseph. She's the founder of the law offices of Kelley Joseph, PA, in Plantation, Florida. As I said, she has practiced family law since 1994 and has spent more than 3 decades helping families through some of the most difficult emotional moments of their lives, from contentious custody battles and high net worth divorces to paternity actions and domestic violence injunctions. She's also a court-appointed guardian ad litem, having been appointed dozens of times by Broward County judges to advocate for children's best interests in complex custody cases. Beyond the courtroom, Kelley has become particularly passionate about representing families with children on the autism spectrum, a perspective informed not only by her legal experience, but by raising a son with autism herself. Throughout her career, she's represented everyone from professional athletes and entertainers to business owners and professionals, all while building a reputation as both a fierce litigator and an honest, accessible advocate. Now, that was a mouthful, and I don't think I even scratched the surface. So, Kelley, my very first question to you is just this. What did I miss? What should people know about you that wasn't mentioned in the introduction?
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, first of all. But I think what I want people to know most, or I like my people who meet with me to know most, is that I'm just a normal person, a regular person, just like you guys are. I've been there. I've been through a divorce. I know the painful conflict and the separation and breakups can have on people. And we are just as much therapists as we are lawyers. And what we try to do in our office is provide a really a home-like environment where it's not quite so cold and indifferent. My staff will meet with the potential client in advance, so I'll have a lot of the information before the client ever even comes in to meet with me. We then will want to find out everything we can about the relationship and about the other party and about your children and about who you are personally. That's really important for me because if I'm going to go into court and I'm going to fight for somebody, I have to know who they are and I have to believe in what they have to tell me. I'm lucky enough that I don't have to take every case that comes in the door anymore. So now I try to focus on those people who truly I feel I can help, and I enjoy that. In addition to that, I can tell you that I was named Broward County Family Law Super Lawyer this year, which means I'm named to be in the top 5% of family law practitioners in the country. I was also named in Best Lawyers, and my firm was named in Best Law Firms in Broward County. I practice solely marital and family law. That's all that I do. I used to be a part of a larger firm for about 17 years and did some criminal. But as a general rule, I just like my office to be a safe and warm place for people to come in and really share what's going on because it's the most important things in their lives, their money and their children.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you sort of already answered my second question, but I'm gonna go ahead and ask it anyway. If I didn't know anything about you, and you and I had 30 seconds or a minute on an elevator, give me a pitch for your firm, right? Tell me who you help, where they're located, and why people choose to work with you in your firm.
Okay, well, I represent primarily those located in Broward County and in South Palm Beach County. I typically represent people who are either involved in, let's say, a high net asset or net worth divorce, or perhaps a contentious custody case. People come to me for things that, a young lawyer or somebody who doesn't have the same experience might not be able to do for them. I have worked with experts throughout the county. I'm familiar with every issue in 31 years, almost every issue, I should say. And that's what I provide that other lawyers don't, is that I have 3 decades of experience and lots of trial experience. I've probably tried over 100 cases in the last 10 years, let alone in my career.
That's awesome. So
We have very good outcomes too, typically, knock on wood.
that's
Yeah.
that's the important thing. Yes, always knock on wood. So let me ask you this, a little more general question, but what got you into law? Did you just always know you wanted to be an attorney? Did you, I don't know, grow up watching Perry Mason reruns or, what led you into law? And then what led you specifically to focus so much on family law?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I did always want to be a lawyer. I can remember being a little girl and wanting to be a lawyer. But the funny thing is I really wanted to get married when I was in college. I was very in tune with finding myself a husband. So the boy I was dating at the time, he's passed away since then, but he was going to law school. And I was afraid he was going to break up with me if I didn't go to law school. So, anyways, long story short is I got in, he didn't, he broke up with me. I went on to law school, and that was the start of my career. But once I was there, I knew I was in the right place. I was very passionate about it. And all of a sudden, getting married became a much less important thing in my life.
And so you made the shift. You started off and you said you did some criminal law. You're working with a bigger firm, but you eventually separated and went your own way, started your own firm, and now you focus specifically on family law. What led you to do family law exclusively?
I always found reading contracts or personal injury cases boring. I just did. I did some clerking, and then I started clerking for a couple of very well-known board-certified family law attorneys. And I was like, you know what? The things that I heard in that office that went on with these people, I was like, this is for me. I love that. I love the really kind of, crazy antics that people get into when they're going through these things. And maybe that's not what motivates me as much now as a young lawyer. That really motivated me. I found it fascinating.
Interesting. So let me ask you this. This is an interesting question that I ask a lot of my clients, especially in family law, because I find that they have a unique perspective on this. Obviously, about 6 years ago, the whole world shut down for a little bit. Everyone went through COVID. And a
Right.
lot of people said that in the family law space, they expect to see like a spike of divorces happening in that wake. But I've talked to some lawyers who said, yeah, that was definitely the case. I've talked to some lawyers who say, no, actually, things dried up during that time. And so I'm curious what your perspective on the shutdowns were and the impact they had on the community, but also how did it affect, if at all, your firm?
Well, I think that everybody got a little tighter about how much money they wanted to spend in their divorces for sure, while everybody was unemployed. But as a general rule, everything changed once COVID came. We all of a sudden everything became electronic, whereas in Broward County we were behind everybody else. So everything, everybody had to e-file at that point. Everybody had to make sure that they were on board with all of the things required to submit orders online through CMS, which is something we were not doing previously. And we were allowed to notarize things while people were on the internet at that point. We didn't have to be those special notaries, the video type notaries. Anybody could do it during that COVID period. But mostly what I found is that people were really scared during COVID. They were much more hesitant about going forward with divorces, more concerned about what would happen to them in the future if they did. And I also found that my staff deteriorated quickly. So I had an assistant I adored, Jennifer, and she unfortunately had some really bad long-term effects of COVID. And despite being a very young girl, she just could never go back to work again. So I found my staff had diminished as well. So not really a great or typical time to have to find a new paralegal.
True.
But typically business was slower but still steady. It doesn't matter. Rain, sleet, snow, hail, hurricane, you're always going to have people looking to go to family court. It's just a fact.
Come rain nor snow nor sleet of night, nothing will stop the divorce papers from getting served.
Absolutely.
However,
Good
that
economy, bad economy, good stock market, bad stuff. We're just either dividing assets or debts.
yeah, that's fair. So let me ask you this. Now, this is the closest thing I asked to a gotcha question in this interview, probably is this. You've been practicing law for over 30 years now. And I'm a firm believer that if you step up to bat enough times, nobody bats 1,000. I'm sure that you've had a couple of moments in your career that you would consider a failure. Maybe it's a client just said the wrong thing. Maybe the paperwork didn't get filed the right way. Maybe just a whole case got decided in a way you thought was totally out of the blue and weird. And it took you a while to understand the process that led to that. But what's one or two of the things you would consider in your career, Kelley, to have been a failure? But what did you learn from that, obviously, and how do you carry that forward to make sure you're giving the best care to your clients?
Well, I think early on in my career, my biggest failure would have been that I was too overwhelmed. I had, was doing too many things at one time. And I remember going into court and referring to the children as the children I was dealing with in the case before that case that morning. So I had messed up the names of the children in this custody case. And I felt just absolutely awful because the judge is the one who corrected me. And I made sure never again to make that mistake. So I certainly felt very embarrassed and humiliated by that. And it's certainly served me well since then because I've certainly never forgotten a child's name since that time. I think the biggest loss that I've had, though, is in February of 2025, I was representing a lovely young lady named Mary Jingles in a divorce case. And she had been telling me that her husband was going to hurt her for a long time. And we did everything we could. We got her the restraining orders. She had a restraining order. She had exclusive possession of her home. And shortly before she died, he had broken into her house and actually left a kill kit in her garage, filled with, like, the gloves and the footies and different ways to kill her on a sheet of paper. And believe it or not, the police did not confiscate that bag. Similarly, she had found a transponder on her car. He had been tracking her whereabouts, and they chose not to take that as well. So she was crying out to the police for help, doing everything she was supposed to do. We were going to the courts. The courts were trying to help. Ultimately, when Mr. Jingles was served with his last restraining order, he's now accused of murdering my client and her father on that February, I think it was February 14th, 2025. About 6 a.m. in the morning, he is alleged to have come around the back door of her home, shot her father in the head, allegedly, went in through the front door. The little girl was sitting on the couch, about 4 years old, and he had said goodbye, I guess, to the grandfather before he shot him. And then he allegedly chased my client upstairs and down the block. And there's video of my client knocking on doors, begging for people to let her in. And ultimately, she found an unlocked door that she went into. But in her panic, I guess she may have forgotten to lock the door on her when she went in.
Mm.
And he followed her into the house and allegedly murdered her and her neighbor. So
Wow.
now he's facing 3 counts of first-degree murder. And even though I didn't know that I did everything that I was supposed to do from a legal standpoint, you can't help but blame yourself and feel
Yeah.
responsible for it. And there's maybe something else I could have done. And she will always be my biggest regret.
Wow. That is one of the hardest stories I've ever heard someone share when it comes to a loss. Because I mean, that really is. We've had a few over the years that have been deaths, but I mean, that's a particularly hard one. And the circumstances from the 4-year-old girl to running down the street, like the police not responding to, I've never even heard, honestly, I've never heard someone speak of a kill kit before. Like that's a new concept to me. But gosh, that's a horrible situation. I'm so sorry to have heard about that. Obviously, I'm very sorry for the family, and I hope that my listeners' thoughts and prayers go out to the survivors, particularly the daughter, the 4-year-old. Gosh, that's horrible. Um, yeah, I'm actually almost at a loss for words because
Sorry,
it
I
really is. And
know.
you had alluded to this in the pre-roll, but I mean, just kind of viscerally going through it. That is a tough situation.
Well, and I haven't
I
spoken
think
about it either. So this is the first time I've actually spoken publicly about it. So yeah.
I appreciate your candor on the subject. And again, in that moment, I don't know that I can consider that a failure because it sounds like you did everything you could have done. I don't know, other than hiring a personal bodyguard on your own dime or something, which that's beyond the reasonable measure usually. Like, I don't know what else you even could have done there.
Well, I guess I think that, maybe the police did not take his weapons. Even though they had seized, I don't know, something like 30 or so automatic and semi-automatic firearms from him the first time I got an injunction.
Wow.
The second time, I guess he had indicated to the officer allegedly that he didn't have any weapons. So I think if I could have done something differently, I probably would have pushed harder on getting him to admit that he had his weapons. I don't know that I could have done it, but I can't help it. I mean, she was still my responsibility in my mind. So even if there's not something legally I could have done, maybe, you can't help but think if you did something different, maybe things would have turned out differently.
Yeah. Gosh, that is very, very tough.
Very- yeah.
Um, Well, let me turn this around though, because again, you've been practicing law for 30 years and some change, and you've clearly had a successful career. You've clearly made a difference in a lot of people's lives. The fact that you're still here 30 years later, still running, a very successful law firm, serving people in Broward County, the Fort Lauderdale area, et cetera. Clearly, you're doing something right. So let me ask you the flip side of that coin is what is one or two of the things in your career, Kelley, that you're most proud of? The proverbial feathers in the cap, if I can ask that.
I think it's funny. They're both opposite ends of the spectrum, two cases that I'm completely proud of. One of which was I was able to effectively terminate for all intents and purposes, the parental rights of a man who had raped his like 10-month-old child. So we made sure that he never saw that child again in family court and continued to pay child support for the rest of the child's life. On the other hand, I represented a man who was, and I don't often do this. I mean, if I've done it 2 or 3 times in 30 years, it's a lot. Whenever I hear the words sexual abuse involved in a case, I typically try to veer the other direction because of the pressure, the intense pressure that you feel associated with those cases. But this guy came into my office and he told me I didn't do it. And I got to tell you, I believed him. And I don't believe anybody, and I believed him. And I was convinced that he did not do anything, and he had been separated from his daughter for like 5 years. So I was able to get an expert appointed, a very well-known expert who did a sexual, I guess it's like a certain type of testing that they can do to determine if you are a child predator. Um, I'm not going to get into the details of what that testing involves, but suffice it to say, they hook certain parts of your body up to a machine and show you pictures of children and other things to determine something that somebody really can't fake. And they don't make it where it's, a gray area. They're not going to show you a 16 or 17-year-old or something like that. It's going to be something really obvious. But she was able to determine to the best of her credibility and reason and putting her own reputation on the line that he absolutely was not a child predator. And we were able to reunify that child with her father, who she ended up going on to live with. And she's a medical doctor today
Wow.
and had a very close relationship with her father. And honestly, I still think of that man all the time and just how very proud I was for him and of him for 5 years later still fighting when I met
Yeah.
him to get his daughter back.
It- One of those things that when you hear, as soon as I hear sexual assault, as soon as I hear, especially with a child, like my eyes almost, I don't say they glaze over, but like I feel like I've already
Mine's,
formed my opinion, right? I'm like,
mhm.
oh, nothing to do with this guy. There's a famous Jewish carpenter who says something about millstones and necks for people that lead little children astray, right? And like that's, I think it's a visceral reaction. So to hear someone come in, but you also want to hear, you want to make sure the innocent are innocent and that they're not being falsely charged. How do you do that? How do you make that call? I mean, obviously you talk to experts and whatnot, but where's that dividing line and how do you handle that sort of a pressure?
Well, the way I look at it is normally, as a younger lawyer, I wouldn't have, honestly. I would have just turned it away. But in my years of experience and seeing the things that I've seen over 30 years, you got to trust your gut. That's basically what it comes down to. And I ask a lot of questions, a lot of questions. I've been dealing with a lot of people over the years. I know what to look for. And primarily, if we weren't there to help men like John, and I'll call him John, if we weren't there to help men like John, the system would be pointless because just as much, what do they say? They say it's better that 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man be, convicted. And that's really the way I look at it. So I really do try to go into every meeting with an open mind. I won't say that I've found a tremendous number of people who I've felt that way about, but there have been a few over the years, certainly, and we've fought and typically we've prevailed.
Well, speaking of legal experience, one of my favorite questions to ask, it's a little more lighthearted usually. But I find that attorneys especially have unique insights on life and the absurdities that come along with being a human being. What's one or two of the more absurd moments that you've had in your career? Things that just kind of maybe make you chuckle or just shake your head at the daftness that is sometimes humanity.
Well, we always said this when I used to do criminal law versus family law. Criminal clients are bad people typically at their very best behavior. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. They only call when they're supposed to. They only do it. They know the routine, as they say. Then you get their family law clients who are really good people at their absolute worst. And they're just out of their minds. I mean, they're doing crazy things to each other. They're breaking the law. They're recording each other without consent, which is a felony in the state of Florida. They're doing all the things they're not supposed to do because they're frightened. And so I'll tell you one time, I had a woman who was concerned that her husband had been unfaithful. And she came into court and we were doing her direct examination and she kept looking at him and she was staring at him like she was going to really kill him. And when his lawyer was cross-examining her afterwards about him being unfaithful and accusing her of basically lying about it, she pulled, it had to be a 10-inch long sexual device out of her purse and put it on the witness stand, and she goes, "This is how I know, because I found this in a drawer and it has the name Jerry on it." His name, let's say, is Mike. So I don't know why somebody would label particularly their sexual enhancement device, but for some reason this guy did. I didn't know what to say or do. I was so glad that it was cross-examination and I didn't really have to do anything, honestly, because I'm not sure I would have dealt with that. But I'll never forget her pulling that out and putting that on the witness stand. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I had a divorce so acrimonious. I mean, they could not agree on anything. We got to the point where we had to flip a coin for each chair in the house, for the dining room table, for their, I don't know, silverware. We were literally flipping a coin, heads or tails, who could get what. And it was going on for, had to be close to 3 years. That's how much they fought about everything. We were both, me and the attorney on the other side, we were like, please God, just let this be over already. But the truth is that we just needed to see it through to trial. And when we got to trial, the judge called our case. I could not find my client. And I was looking, and all of a sudden I saw the other attorney and she couldn't find her client. And we were looking and looking, and we're all looking around for the clients. The bailiffs are looking around. Well, long story short is we found them in the stairwell making out with each other. And at that point, they said that they no longer wanted a divorce. And they reconciled for about 6 months and then started at it again. It seemed to be some sort of foreplay for them, I guess. I'm not sure.
That's actually going to be one of the questions I'm going to ask you is how often do you experience that where couples in the midst of a divorce, because of the actions undergoing, because of the way that you're working with them and the other opposing counsel's working, how often do they reconcile, and does it ever actually work out, or is it really more of a postponing the inevitable?
It's never the case as you think it's going to be, is what it is. It's, sometimes you meet people and they get along so great and you're like, why are you two even getting a divorce, or why are you separating? If it's, we have a lot more paternity today, as much paternity as we did divorce. So I don't want to forget about my paternity clients. Women are not as apt to get married as young. Men are not as apt to marry a woman because she's pregnant. Times are different today than they were even 30 years ago when I started. And we have a lot of paternity. And I find that the people who get back together are typically the people who are the most unhealthy. The ones who you're sure they hate each other. Those are typically the people who surprise you and get back together. I have a case now where I've been representing this man since 2019. I mean, I think this woman has taken out 6 restraining orders against him over the years. He's currently got temporary custody of their daughter. She's trying to get the child back. She scored like a 498 on a PET test. I don't know if you know anything about PET testing. It's alcohol testing. They do it through blood work. Basically, if you lit a lighter within 6 feet of her, she probably would have spontaneously combusted, to give you, a minor version of how high that score is. But anyways, they reconciled 3 times between 2020 and now. And it's just, it's a sick, in my opinion, it rarely works out. Occasionally it does. But if it does, it's because people want to stay together miserable, in my experience, rather than, actually changing things. People typically don't change.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So here's a very important question. And I need you to, approach this question with all utmost seriousness here. Who is your favorite pop culture or fictional attorney?
I can't say Paul Newman from The Verdict, I guess. So, um,
I mean, if he's your favorite, he's your favorite. You're welcome
I
to say
think
that.
I was the lawyers in Kramer versus Kramer. I think that's when I first
Okay.
decided that I wanted to be a divorce attorney, was when I saw that movie and what happened in that movie. But I think my favorite lawyer would be Joe Pesci. I don't remember the name of the
My
movie,
cousin
but
Vinny.
Yes, my cousin Vizzy. He's my favorite fictional lawyer.
I
Yes.
think that's the most commonly referenced attorney that people answer when I give that one. I'm actually surprised. I hadn't even thought about the movie in a long time, but nobody's ever mentioned of all the divorce attorneys I've talked to, family law attorneys, no one's ever mentioned Kramer versus Kramer, and it's such an apt one because it really is the story of a divorce. And yeah,
Okay.
that's I haven't seen it in 30 years. That's when I worked at Blockbuster Video back in the day to date myself, right?
It's a good
That's
movie.
fascinating.
Good movie.
Good movie.
There's a good movie on
Um,
Netflix right now too about divorce with Adam. I can't remember his last name. Adam. What Adam? What's his name? Not Adam Sandler. The other Adam. The one who was the new Darth Vader in the new set of Star Wars
Oh,
movies.
only because you're saying it, I can't think of his name now. Driver, Adam
Yes,
Driver.
Adam
Was that
Driver.
marriage story? Is
Yes,
that what it is?
that was a really good story about divorce, and it was very accurate in my opinion. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, this is an unofficial endorsement of the movie Marriage Story on Netflix. We don't get any revenue, but please feel free to if you've seen the movie Marriage Story, just sound off down below and let us know if it's worth watching because I'm always looking for something new to add to my queue, as they say. Okay, so Kelley, you've practiced law for 30 years, and 30 years is a long time, and a lot has changed. Like society has changed so much in that time. We went from a pre-internet era. 1994 was the dawn of the internet and
Sure.
screaming modems and everything else. And now everyone has got the little magical rectangle in their pocket that's always on, and they can take pictures and they can send them around and everything else. What has changed over the course of the last 30 years, particularly about, divorce, emotionally, culturally, technologically, et cetera? You've given a couple of examples already. The a very unfortunate situation where he was literally tracking her, put an air tag or whatever on her car. But what are the big trends that have changed over the 30 years in family law?
Well, I'll tell you what, let me start with what I think is the most unfortunate thing that's happened is that when I started practicing law, I had a beeper, as I said, my boss used to beat me 911 all day long. But lawyers at that time, when we had a problem or a conflict with our clients, we had to pick up a phone and we had to talk to each other. The advent of email did nothing for the practice of law, in my opinion. All it did is it allowed lawyers to become email warriors. And basically, this type of person who writes this really aggressive email, and then you call them on the phone and they're like, hi, it's Joe. And they're very different when you actually speak to them. But the benefit of us communicating was we would resolve things so much easier without all the acrimony and the conflict that goes on now with many lawyers, young lawyers, old lawyers, especially in family law, because people have a tendency to take on their clients' problems. And there's a lot of lawyers out there who take things personally, rather than understanding that it's not their life, it's not their family. So I think that, and also the fact that we used to have to mail in our requests, we'd do a motion, we would mail it in through the U.S. mail system to request a hearing. And I remember when we got faxes, and there was one lawyer in town who would always turn her fax off at 4:30. That was a big deal. But um, things move slower. I think that people were more intentional. We also had, we didn't have 50-50 time sharing then, which is now the norm. It's actually the public policy in the state of Florida that each child have equal time sharing, which I'm not a big proponent of, but it is what it is. I understand it. Um, so we had the dads typically having the Wednesday and every other weekend, and the moms were typically the primary parents, and things typically were just a lot kinder than they are today, I find. I think the technology has allowed us to increase the amount of cases we can handle. At one time, it provides us a lot of cuts a lot of corners that we otherwise would have to take, in terms of being able to communicate with clients, communicate with the court, upload orders, and so forth. And that's been, I will say that's a plus in that way. But I think that emails generally is just you'll find, and I don't know if you've experienced this with other lawyers, but it is the worst thing that has ever happened to marital and family law, especially when people communicate with each other. Because when they don't have to talk to each other and they don't have to be accountable to each other, it's a lot easier to be cruel. Um, I think what else has changed? Let's see. Well, obviously, we've abolished permanent alimony in the state of Florida, so nobody pays alimony until death or remarriage anymore, unless their case existed before a certain date. We allow men or women, depending on who's paying alimony, to retire today. So now alimony terminates upon retirement, even if it is ordered for a number of years after that. So I think that we've equalized men and women a lot. I think that there is no longer an assumption that the husband makes more money than the wife, and many times it is the opposite. Um, we also considered fathers to be as good parents as mother. In other words, having a womb doesn't give you any superior parenting abilities, apparently, which was a shocker, still a shocker to some women, and to some men. But we have same-sex marriages now. We have same-sex adoptions. Hopefully, those will continue. Um, we have transgender marriages. Hopefully, those will continue. Um, I think we just have a tendency to be more understanding of what is love and what is a family today, which I think is a great thing.
So you've represented a lot of people over the years, including some pretty higher profile people. I don't need you to name drop names. This isn't, People Magazine or Us Weekly, but you represented professional athletes, entertainers, other high net worth, high profile individuals. What are the unique challenges that come from trying to keep a divorce like that as private as possible?
Well, typically, if they're smart, they know that coming in, and it's really a matter of a private negotiation. In most cases, that's what happens before the case is settled, before it's ever filed. So, in other words, we've already gotten to a marital settlement agreement and a parenting plan before we ever file it. We file it as an uncontested divorce, and we usually file it we can file it using the wife's name as the primary party, and typically those go by pretty smoothly and pretty quietly. The child support cases that I've had with certain celebrities, those have not been quite as smooth. There's a sense of entitlement sometimes that comes with celebrity or with money, where people believe maybe they're entitled to different or better treatment because they get it in every other aspect of their life. But they find out very quickly that doesn't work in family court. So I think that that's a bit of a hindrance, but overall, and sometimes they don't like to pay their bills, to be honest with you. It doesn't matter how much money they have, they just don't like to pay their bills. But as a general rule, I find they're just like everybody else. Everybody who comes into a family lawyer is looking for help. So typically they're there to listen more than they are to talk.
Gotcha. The average person who comes into your office probably comes in with some preconceived notions about what you can do, what you can't do, etc. What are some of the most common things that people, how do I say, the biggest misconceptions people have about who you are and what you can do for them?
I want full custody of my children. That's a big one. First of all, custody doesn't even exist anymore. We have parenting plan and time sharing schedules. There is no custody. But it's difficult, and you're going to have a difficult client. So I try to stay away from those cases where one parent feels that type of absent a situation like I spoke about earlier, where you've got a literal abuse of a child, absent those circumstances. Both parents have a right to raise their children. And when you have a party who expects you to just, because of your reputation or because of the cases that you've won or what they know you for, that they're going to pay you. So why can't you do this for me? You're supposed to be able to do anything, and we can't do anything. We can do what's ethically and legally possible. But there's typically many people, our big one is they want full custody. They want they want to be taken, if they're paternity cases, they want alimony. Um, what else? We have people who want everything in terms of assets. We have people who like to dissipate marital assets, hide money. Those are always fun cases when they hide money. Closely held corporations, people in family businesses, cash businesses. Oh, it gives me a headache thinking about it. But those are the ones that are the cases where, when somebody's dealing in cash, it's very difficult to prove how much money they make. And if they're smart about it and they don't deposit that money or they work in crypto, it's getting harder and harder for us to trace. So that would be something I would say that people have a sense of entitlement about, I think.
In a related note, high net worth divorces in general obviously are a thing. Businesses are involved, money's involved, etc. I've heard that they're often more of a financial investigation more than a legal case in a real sense. What's something people don't realize about untangling wealth?
Well, I think they don't realize this generally about divorce in general is that it's mostly math. And that's what it is. It's mostly number crunching. What is fair? Equitable distribution is not necessarily equal. It's equitable, but typically it's equal. So what's half of the equity in your house? What's half of your retirement worth? What's half of your assets and debts? And it's really not very sexy at all, but that's what we do is we divide assets and we figure out which assets divide similarly. For example, a retirement plan, the value of that will not be the same as cash because if you pulled a retirement plan out, it would be subject to penalties and taxes, right? So you have to take that amount minus their tax rate, minus the penalties, and that kind of equate that to cash if you're going to do it. We transfer retirements by something called a qualified domestic relations order, which prevents it from being a tax-free transfer as long as you don't touch it. And it basically gives you the same retirement plan as your spouse in their company, and it can grow over the years. We have sell a lot of houses, work with a lot of realtors, work with a lot of real estate attorneys. People have to buy their spouses out of their houses. So it's a surprise to them sometimes that they have to refinance their mortgages and assume that mortgage if they want to keep the house, because obviously the other party's never going to own a house as long as they're liable on the marital home. So it's not even a matter of whether the person will pay it. It's a matter of, I need you to refinance it or I'm never going to own a home again. So those are some of the things that surprise people that they don't think about before they come to us are things like the dependency exemption for their children, prepaid college plans, holiday vacations. Am I going to be allowed to travel out of the country with my children? Am I going to be allowed to travel in the country with my children? Why does she have to talk to the children every night? Why does he have to do it by video conference call? Those are the kinds of things that people are surprised by that happen in typical cases.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, you've talked about, I think it's even on your website that you are a parent of a child, a son with autism. How has that personal experience changed the advice that you give to clients with special needs, and how has it impacted your practice?
Well, and when you look at divorce generally and you compare that to divorce with people with children on the autism spectrum, you'll find that the percentage of people who get divorced with children on the spectrum is substantially higher. And the reason it's substantially higher is because typically you'll have one parent who may be in denial, typically, one parent who thinks they're going to grow out of it. It's not that bad. He or he's making a big deal out of nothing. All kids are delayed when they speak. All kids can flap their hands in the air or walk on their toes. And you typically have some element of denial in my experience. Then you have the other parent who typically manages, there's usually one parent who manages everything. Sometimes you have both parents, but as a general rule, there's one parent. And I think the thing that has changed my view the most is trying to work with those parents on communication. Because if they cannot communicate and they cannot make joint decisions, the only person who suffers is their child. Your child needs a therapy, you two can't get along, the sky is blue, the sky is red. The child suffers because we know that early intervention is key with children. And when people litigate through their children's childhoods, by the time they get on the same page, it's oftentimes too late. So I try to remind parents who have typical children that it could be worse. And I try to remind parents with special needs that it could be worse. And it could. There's a lot of financial aspects. Typically, people who have children with financial needs are not wealthy. They're typically triple mortgaged on their homes from therapies and other costs, get, quick fixes for their children. And mostly there's also the issues of transitioning. Some children don't do well in 50-50 timesharing, especially children who are on the spectrum. They like their stuff. They like their room. They like the way things are. They need that routine in order to function. And when you're transitioning from one home to the other, it's going to take you 3 days to get used to it. And then it's time to go back to the other parent. So I think the courts are learning now, and I've done a lot of advocating for this over the years, to understand that autistic families have to be treated differently. children with special needs have to be treated differently. It doesn't mean that both parents don't have the same rights, because they do, but maybe it's the parents who need to go in and out of the home instead of the child, you know? So you
Yeah,
have to be creative in how you deal with it in order to protect both the child and the parents.
that makes sense. If somebody came to you today and they were considering a divorce, but maybe they hadn't made up their mind yet, what advice would you give to them before filing?
Go to therapy. I'll give them a name of a good marriage counselor I know, somebody I know who's proactive, who's not gonna just listen and say, "Oh, so how do you feel? So how do you feel?" But will actually get involved, and I always try to save marriage. I'm not in the business of divorce. That's not my business. My business is helping people who are already at the point where they know that they don't wanna be married anymore. If there's even an indicia of thought in my mind that a marriage can be saved, I will always try and convince the people to try and reconcile before they come to me. It should be a last resort, obviously. So if I can save a marriage, God bless them. And it happens. It does.
That's awesome. Well, Kelley, I want to be as respectful of your time as possible. We're already crossing the hour mark here, I think, at least from the beginning here. And so, in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you my three closing questions. I'm
Uh-oh.
going to give them to you right now so you can kind of percolate on them. And then we'll jump over, take a look at your site and everything else again. Question number one will be, if I gave you a magical wand and you could wave it and make one change to your firm as it currently exists, what would you change and why? Number two, if you can go back in time and meet young Kelley, what advice would you give yourself other than the obvious, which we all know is, hey, there's this thing called Bitcoin coming. When it comes out, buy a lot of it, hold it till it crosses 100K. And then number three is, if I gave you my magical pen, and with this pen, you could strike one law from the record, add a law or edit a law, what law would you strike, add, edit, change, etc. While you're percolating on that, however, we are going to jump over and take a look again at your website. Again, I'm talking to the lovely Kelley Joseph, Kelley A. Joseph, PA, of the law offices of Kelley A. Joseph, PA. It is a family law firm. She runs a family law firm in Fort Lauderdale. Not Fort Lauderdale. You're in Fort Lauderdale, but
West
it's
Broward. Yeah, West Broward.
Plantation. West
Yeah.
Broward. There we go. Broward County, and she focuses on all aspects of family law: alimony, child support, family, spousal support, custody, divorce with children, modifications, paternity, high net worth divorces, etc. If you are considering a divorce, if you need someone to help represent you, if you need modifications, etc., she would be a great resource for you if you're in that neck of the woods. So please visit her online. Again, we'll have links to her stuff down below, but you can find her at kjosephlaw.com. That's kjosephlaw.com, as in Kelley, kjosephlaw.com, or give her a phone call at 954 280 6411. And again, as always, we will have links to her website and everything else down below. She's got lots of great reviews. I looked her up online earlier on Google, and she definitely had a lot of smiling, glowing reviews of the work that she's done. So clearly, she would be a wonderful resource for you. Our final sponsor today is SearchSift. Let me pull up their website here. SearchSift, did you know why in the online advertising space, certain niches like legal clicks can cost 50 to 100 to $200 or more just to get a single click coming in from Google? It's not because Google has a magical make everything's expensive for lawyers and other businesses buttons. It's because Google Ads is an auction. And when 5 or 10 or 20 firms or other businesses are bidding on the same high intent search phrase, whether it's car accident lawyer, divorce lawyer, criminal defense lawyer, roofer, plumber, HVAC, whatever it happens to be, the price goes up and up. It just gets bid up and up. And here's what most firms and businesses miss. Before someone ever clicks an ad, before they ever see the map pack, before they ever choose a firm or a business, Google's already shaping the search. And they're shaping that search with autocomplete. And that's where SearchSift comes in. SearchSift helps position your firm earlier in the search journey inside of their predictive search, which people see before they make their decision. So instead of fighting on page one for one or two spaces, whether it's in the SEO position or whether it's in the ads, instead you're simply getting shown and you become the only game in town. You don't pay just to show up. You pay only when somebody actually clicks. And that's the neat thing about SearchSift. They are so confident in what they are doing that they don't charge you to rank you in Google. They simply get you to rank on page one, and they only charge you for actual people visiting you from Google. And it's usually much cheaper than it is if you were to use Google AdWords, etc. So if you're interested, please visit them online at searchsift.com. That is SearchSift, SYFT, searchsift.com, and see what your market looks like. If you're tired of paying auction prices for every lead and every click, maybe it's time to stop fighting where everyone else is fighting. Visit searchsift.com. And as always, we will have links to all of our sponsors down below. All right. So, Kelley, closing question time. Number one, I have a magical wand and I give it to you. And with this magical wand, you can change one thing about your firm, anything you want, because it's a magical wand. What would you change?
Other than having, like, 10 more, really amazing support staff, I would have become more techno savvy.
Tech
I would have
savvy.
about ChatGPT and about all of these new AIs, and about the things you're talking about, the search engine marketing, all of these. And the internet is such an amazing thing when it's used properly. We don't use it for case law, as we know, but we are now expected by the Florida bar. I don't know if you know this, but we are actually expected to use AI where we should be using AI and disclose it to our clients, because we shouldn't be charging them for doing it manually anymore. So I probably would have learned it a little bit sooner than the crash course that I've had to start taking recently over the last year or so. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. They say ChatGPT has passed the bar with like a 90%, but at the same time, it also has a tendency to hallucinate. So we've had attorneys getting fines and sanctions for, running a brief through ChatGPT and not fact checking it. So AI is an impressive tool. I use it every single day in my line of work. I actually use it in 3 different lines of work that I do. I think it's a really cool tool, but it never replaces the human at the end of the day. I think that human element is obviously very, very important, but
When we were talking before, that was something I should have mentioned. ChatGPT is the bane of my existence too, because every client I have likes to take my emails and my emotions and run them through ChatGPT. And they go, "What about these cases?" I'm like, "Those cases don't exist." Yeah. So yeah, that's the other thing. We put that in our retainer agreement now, that they're coming back to us with their ChatGPT changes.
that's fair. That's fair. I've actually had a couple of interactions with attorneys where there was a lawsuit being threatened, and I definitely have run all of their notes through just to see if it would parse the data. But I'm usually not looking at it to cite case law, but just what is the actual ramifications of this? What are they actually asking? How do I read this? Again, it's a tool. At the end of the day, it should never be mistaken
And
for
that's a way
actual.
to use it, of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
100%,
But
100%.
maybe
Okay,
cite it
so
in the
Matt.
brief.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said just maybe don't cite it in your brief.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's like citing Wikipedia in a research paper, right?
exactly.
My kids were always like, my teacher says I can never go to Wikipedia. I'm like, always go to Wikipedia. Just don't
Oh,
cite it and don't let it be your last place. It's a jump off point. It's a place where people have aggregated knowledge together, and it's fine as it's like you don't cite Google, right? Oh, I went to Google and I searched for it. So you don't cite Google, but you use it as a tool to get further down the rabbit hole and figure out where things are. So it's a good idea. Question number two. We, without breaking the space-time continuum, are able to travel back in time, and you meet young Kelley, maybe 1994, fresh out of law school, and you're able to go whisper just one piece of advice in your ear without breaking that space-time continuum. What advice would you give yourself and why?
I would tell myself to diversify and learn some other areas of the law, maybe probate and estates, bankruptcy, because, family law is a love-hate relationship for those of us who practice it. And my love for it ebbs and flows. And there are some years where I adore what I do, and other years that I can't stand what I do. And that's just the truth of every family law attorney, because it's a difficult, emotional toll that it can take on you. So I think if I had some other areas to practice, I'd be able to walk away from family law and do some probates and estates or do some bankruptcy. Unfortunately, all I do is family law, so there's nowhere really for me to go. So I think that's the advice I would give young Kelley, so that she didn't go as crazy as I did some of those times, and having to deal with these cases.
That's fair. Well, I have to say, I know that family law can take its toll emotionally, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for people who put themselves more or less on the front line. I mean, you're there, you are unintentionally the therapist for a lot of people, men and women, who come to you and just don't even know what they're doing. So I'm sure you earn your hourly keep, to be sure, but man, it's gotta be tough. It has to
Thankless
grind on you
job.
sometimes,
Yeah, it's a thankless job most of the time, even when you do a great job.
even when you do a good job. It's like, I hate the lawyer. That's why lawyer jokes are a thing, right?
Yep.
That's why we do this podcast, by the way. We're here to humanize the attorney and help people know that there's a real human behind the law
Thank
firm. And you're
you.
getting a
We
chance to meet
appreciate that.
Kelley Joseph, real human being, not just an
Shocking.
attorney bot.
Yes.
All right, question number 3. I'm going to give a shameless plug to kansasmonks.org. It is a monastery in Atchison, Kansas, and one of the priests must have blessed this pen because it seems like it has miraculous powers. But unfortunately, I've loaned it out so many times it's almost out of ink. And so, if I were to loan this pen to you and you could make one change to the law, whether it's striking a rule, a law, adding a law, or editing, what one law, national, local, can be in your wheelhouse, or you could just get rid of income tax? What one law would you change and why?
Well, you can't say get rid of income tax because that's just too enticing. But no, I don't. I think what I would say is what I've been advocating for over the last year and a half. I've been working with Representative Bartleman to change the law on the domestic violence statutes because, as I mentioned to you early on, they didn't seize Mr. Jingle's guns. And I would like to make that change within the law, similar as they have red flag laws, which are those. I don't know if you're familiar with red flag laws, but when somebody is necessarily not competent or potentially suicidal, the law enforcement can go to a judge and get an order to seize their guns from them. So I think that if we could make the sheriffs responsible for seizing the weapons rather than leaving it up to the respondent on the honor system to surrender the weapons, I think that a few more people might be alive today. So that would be the change that I would make.
That's a
And we've tried to pass it this year. We weren't successful. We're hoping next year.
Yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of pushback on that because people hear red flag law and they immediately think the government's coming for my guns. And I have that knee-jerk reaction as well because I don't want people in the same way. And you said this earlier, and I think it's a wonderful quote about law. It's better for 100 guilty people to go free than one innocent man to get in prison. And it's kind of the same thing. We don't want to take the right to self-defense, which is an inalienable right, away from sound citizens who simply are on the wrong side of a political issue. But at the same time, where the rubber meets the road is cases like you were mentioning
Well,
before.
think about it this way. They don't take the guns until a judge has already reviewed the facts of the case and ordered that the person surrender their guns. So it isn't an automatic thing that happens in every case. It's just in those cases where it's been court ordered, they enforce everything else. I just want them to enforce that part too.
Well, that's important. It's already been court ordered. So at that point, there should be some mechanism in place to enforce the court order, which is definitively the case. So, well, Kelley, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners today. I do always like to let my guests have the final word. Are there any last words, thoughts of wisdom, or just in general thoughts that you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, I just want to leave your listeners with the idea that how well you treat each other is how well your children will turn out. If you're okay and your spouse is okay, your children will be okay. If you're a mess and your spouse is a mess, or you're at each other all the time, that's where we're seeing a rise in teenage pregnancies and substance abuse and in other areas. Just try to keep we always say we're doing what's in the best interest of our children. Be nice to each other. That'll be in the best interest of your children. Yeah.
Gotcha. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what is the best way for them to do that? Is it just going to the website?
They can go straight to my website, or they can go to my email, which is Kelley, Kelley, at kjosephslaw.com.
All righty. Well, there we go. Well, this has been the Attorney Post. I've been talking with the lovely Kelley A. Joseph, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears her name. As always, though we do talk about a lot of legal issues in this podcast, it does not constitute legal advice. And you should always, if you have a legal issue, seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who specializes in the matter that you need help with. However, if you live in the Broward County area and you're having a family law issue, I can say that Kelley seems like she has a great head on her shoulders and will be a wonderful resource for you. So again, please visit her website below, give her a phone call, etc., etc. As far as the podcast goes, if you're listening to this on any of the major podcast repositories, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, etc., we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please feel free to give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment down below, especially if you have any Netflix movies that you want to recommend to us to watch next on our queue. And but the number one thing you can do to help us grow this podcast is simply this. If you know someone who would benefit from the knowledge found in this podcast, please share it with them. If you know someone who's investigating a family law issue down in Florida, share this podcast with them, because if they don't know their rights, they don't have any. And the number one way you do that is you simply talk to an attorney and you know your rights. Until next time, this is Justin West with the Attorney Post signing off. Thank you guys for listening, and goodbye.